Well, the first stage may not have gone quite as expected, but we're still going to be doing this. Before we get into the new Legend stage, I'm just going to mention a few things. A lot of people might be a bit disappointed with their results because their picks didn't go through. I know Space Soldiers didn't go particularly well because they had to play with their coach Hardstyle instead of Calyx, I think it was. And a lot of people weren't happy with that because they had no way of knowing that until the major started. Renegades didn't do as well as expected. I, for one, thought that my Virtus Pro analysis was absolutely terrible because I thought the Virtus Pro would at least get one map, and as we all know, that didn't go too well. But look at it this way, the new Challenger stage is only worth 1 point, and in the new Legend stage, team picks that you get correct are now worth 3 points. So it's going to be much easier on the final pick if you do well in this stage, and consider anything you did well in the first stage to be a little bit of a bonus. But to be honest, if Counter-Strike was always predictable, it wouldn't be any fun to watch, would it? I mean, some of the highlights of the tournament were actually the upsets. I mean, Vega defeating Big and ruining my 0-3 pick was still an exciting match to watch. No one probably saw Spirit beating North, and that completely back and forth game between Ninjas in Pyjamas and Australis in Mirage that ended 28-26, probably ruining most people's pick'ems. I mean, that was such an entertaining match to watch. It was constantly going back and forth. And that's what makes Counter-Strike such a fun thing at the end of the day. But that being said, let's focus on the current Legends and who will go through to the final. Again, there will be timestamps in the description if you want to skip ahead and see the final results or my individual team analysis. Whether you love them or hate them, you can't deny that FaZe is a powerhouse of a team, having arguably some of the best players from each team role in the game, stemming from some of the best teams in the world. I feel I've stolen this quote from someone else, but FaZe were designed with the intention of winning majors. And while that really hasn't come completely true as of yet, I believe that they will be making it through this stage. The recent performances have been a bit hit and miss, as they recently lost to fnatic and Mouse, but they were able to beat teams like MiBR and jeetu, and I think that we will see them making it to the finals once again. I'm not sure what the community consensus will be on FaZe going through 3-0, because this team has a history of strange results in these stages, especially in best of ones where anything can actually happen. But while people may see them going undefeated, I'm personally just on the safe side, going to put them to go through and not put them in the 3-0 slot. NaVi earlier this year looked like a contender to be one of the best teams in the world. They were able to completely dominate teams like Australis, Big and Mouse, winning 2-1, 3-1. Whenever it came to a final, they were always able to show up, and their players looked like some of the best in the world. I don't even think I need to talk too much about Simple as a star player at this point, as he usually ends up being the player that most people have their eyes on anyway. The whole lineup is extremely well seasoned, and Zeus is still holding up really well as an in-game leader. Some people don't really like him that much, but I think he's actually able to hold up the team quite well. And Flamey, I think Flamey's a bit underappreciated, as a lot of people just focus on Simple, but Flamey can really show up as a player, and he's able to blaze through matches when he shows up on the day. If I had to take a guess as to where we could see NaVi based on recent performances, I would honestly see them actually making it the semi-finals this time around. Maybe even making it to the final, who knows? But I'd say they're probably the safest pick based on consistency right now. I know if you look on HLTV right now, I think they lost to a team called Ghost and some other smaller teams. But when it comes to majors, they're probably the most consistent team you can rely on. Cloud9 are the current major champions from E-League Boston, and massive props to them for being the first North American team to win a major. I don't think too many people had them going on to win, myself included, so it was really nice to see them pull through and win the tournament. Cloud9 have almost always shown to be a team worthy of making the final stages in any tournament. However, recently things have been a whole new ball game due to maybe the largest change to their roster they've had for quite some time, as they recently swapped out 2 players for Steiko and Golden. And a few months after winning the major, it really seems their performance has dropped a bit, losing to teams such as E-United in the Chicago qualifier, and in the past few months they've just looking quite disappointing. Will they've sorted things out by the time we see them play? I honestly can't be sure, but having to work off of recent performances and how since the major win they've just dropped off, I don't even think we'll see them qualify here. We could see them pull out something amazing, but I wouldn't actually put them to go through this time. G2 currently comprise of arguably the best French players in the CSGO scene at the minute, although watching this team's lineup has actually been of a gain of itself, seeing how the French shuffle has occurred so many times this year, you could never tell which player we're going to end up with. Ooh, maybe not that one. The current state of G2 has seen them, again, struggling to take on smaller teams like that of Windingo, Luminosity. They've just been struggling a bit, and they've only recently won over VP, who themselves were struggling at the time. You know what? There's a part of me that is telling me that G2 is going to go 0-3 out of this. They've been struggling a bit. Kenny S and Shocks have been a bit all over the place as of recent, and I'm not sure whether the time at their boot camp for about a week or two will have really had enough time for them to reform. But at the end of the day, I do see them actually winning a match here. I think they'll probably win 1 or 2 matches, but I don't think we'll see them go through this time around. Some people might put them to go through without winning a match. That's fair, but I think they just won't qualify here. Okay, I need to make one thing clear before I get into this team's review. This is the Quantum Bellator Fire team from last major. They just have a different organisation. With that out of the way, Winstrike surprised everyone at the last major, going through to the final stage to face off against Natter's Vincere. While it did end up basically being NaVi's golden ticket to the semi-finals, Winstrike showcased that it was possible for an almost unheard of lineup to go ahead and take on the likes of Mouse and Gambit and actually win. So they do look like they could upset again. That being said, however, over the past few months, they seem to have lost that major attitude they've once had. And funnily enough, they even lost to the Quantum Bellator Fire new roster and other CIS teams such as Pro 100 and EPG. And I really hope I don't have to end up eating a boot in this stage. But I would likely put Winstrike as one of the teams to go 0-3. We could see them perform a Team Vega or a Team Spirit, winning a couple of matches here or there. But I do think they look like one of the weaker candidates in this stage. Oh, fnatic. This team's name is pretty much associated with majors at this point. They've won so many majors in the early years of CSGO, but times have changed and we've seen them generally make it to later stages of majors as opposed to winning the whole thing. And if we're talking only recently, they've been performing really lackluster. A DreamHack Stockholm, which should have been their home ground, should have been a place they performed well at. They lost 16-6 to Optic, 2-1 to Mouse and Heroic. And funnily enough, they did win against FaZe 2-0 in a very close best of 3. But they've been a bit all over the place as of recent. Fnatic have been known to pull out the stops at majors, and I do get the feeling that Fnatic is going to be the hit or miss team of people's pick'ems. I think people will go back and forth saying, no, Fnatic will qualify, and there'll be people saying, no, Fnatic are just going to drop out at this stage. And as for my view, I think they will have seen what's gone wrong for them in the past month. I think they will have seen what went wrong at Stockholm, and they will think and will have improved on that. That being said, however, with all of the teams that have come through the Challenger stage and have got the fire in their eyes, Fnatic are looking a bit weak here, and I think we're probably going to see them go 2-3. Probably going to be quite close, but I can't put them making it going through to the final, I'm afraid. Mousesports. Mousesports are quite an interesting team in my opinion. They're another one of these mixed teams like FaZe or HellRaisers, but they're sort of the safe middle ground of the two because they're a bit more consistent than HellRaisers, but aren't quite as high tier as FaZe. And even if we've seen them struggle in the later stages of tournaments, we've seen them recently at DreamHack beat teams like FaZe and HellRaisers, ultimately losing to a close game to North in the semi-finals. And with the addition of Snacks from VP, he seems to really be settling in well at Mouse. And I'm actually quite excited to see what Mouse can put up at this major. Seeing how Mouse has almost always been a relatively safe pick in the later stages, I'm going to put them to go through. I think it might be a bit of a bumpy road for them. I mean, we could see them meet the likes of Jeetu or fnatic, which I've mentioned before, a bit of a shaky team, and they could get knocked out themselves. But at the end of the day, I think Mouse will actually make it. MiBR, or Made in Brazil, is essentially the former SK roster with the addition of Stewie2K and Tarek from Cloud9. MiBR are no strangers to the major environment. Players like Cold Zero and Fallen, they're renowned for playing well at majors, and it's not really a surprise to see them coming back to majors time after time. MiBR have been performing a bit like the SK of old time recently, as they've put up solid results, winning against teams like Mouse and HellRaisers at DreamHack, but funnily enough, their counterpart team always seems to be Liquid. They've really struggled to beat teams like Liquid, and I think it'll be interesting when it comes full circle and if we see these teams fighting again. They do have a lot of good talent with them, and I think we will see them going through. They should be a relatively safe pick, and I am mindful of their recent performances being a bit shaky, and I wouldn't rely on MiBR going through undefeated. I think that FaZe or even NaVi are safer to put 3-0, but then again, being the Pick'em Challenge, nothing is safe. But I would personally put MiBR going through 3-1. Now, those are the current legends out of the way, and what I'm going to do now is have a very small talk about each of the teams from the previous stage, how they performed, and just where I'm going to put them. Ninjas in Pyjamas went 3-0 in the last stage, and I don't think many people had them to do that, especially since they were up against Australis for doing it. Ninjas in Pyjamas looked really strong in that stage. However, the teams they were facing were a VP who were in absolute shambles, and I probably shouldn't have put them to go through in my previous stage. Up against TyLoo, again, TyLoo probably weren't one of the strongest opponents. The toughest opponent they faced in the previous stage is Australis, and that was in a massive overtime of 28-26. So I think we will see them go through in this stage. I think they will qualify, but I don't think we'll see them go 3-0 again. I think there will be quite a lot of people who will pick HellRaisers to go through to the final here, but there's one thing to bear in mind if you are picking them. HellRaisers have only just narrowly managed to get through to this stage by beating Optic 25-23, Gambit 16-14, and North 19-17. Their victories have been very, very close, admittedly against pretty good opponents, but when we see them go up against the likes of FaZe, Mouse in the later stages, I think we might see them kind of struggle a bit, and we have to rely on their main players, that being Voxic, Woxic, and Issa, really going large. And the problem is, I think we will actually see them kind of fade out a bit towards the end. I can't put HellRaisers to go through at this stage, to be honest. I think a lot of people will choose them, and that's fair enough opinion, but I think there are some other teams who I put over HellRaisers to go through here. It was really impressive to see TyLoo turn up at this stage. They actually produced some pretty exciting matches to watch, and I have to say that seeing players like Somebody and Bintet go off was absolutely impressive to watch. But when they got to this stage, they managed to get through by beating teams such as Renegades and Spirit, and they're going to be facing much tougher opponents in this stage. And while I think they could be capable of taking a map or two off of other teams, I think they'll probably be a bit out of their depth now they're actually in this stage. While Australis probably upsetted a lot of people by not going 3-0, ruining their pick'ems, myself included, I think that they are, at the end of the day, probably the strongest candidate to go through to the finals at this stage. Australis looked really strong in the matches where they did show up, even if their decision-making was a little bit poor here or there. But at the end of the day, you can't deny that Australis is a strong team, and I have no doubt that they will go through at this stage. I probably wouldn't feel safe putting them going 3-0 here, though. Liquid were one of the other teams, along with Ninjas in Pyjamas, to go through undefeated, and they looked probably the stronger in doing so. They managed to beat Optic 16-4, HellRaisers 16-9, and were one of the only teams to actually manage to counter Vega, who seemed to be able to take over everyone in that stage. I think Liquid would actually be another comfortable pick to go 3-0 this time around. While I think I've said that the Ninjas in Pyjamas probably could lose a map here or there, I think I'd actually be quite comfortable in picking Liquid to go 3-0 again. But the only problem I have with that is that we could see Liquid face up against like a FaZe or NaVi, and they could take a map off of them. But I would either put them to qualify if you're unsure about them, or put them 3-0 if you want to take a bit of a risk or don't have a slot for them in here because I've put them too many strong teams in this stage. Complexity have beyond impressed me to get to this stage. I had them down as going 0-3, one of my other choices go 0-3, and so to get them here is very impressive. However, I think this is where the line ends for them. They only managed to get through by beating Vega Squadron in a very close match, and Space Soldiers who had a coach 16-11. And the fact they're meeting the teams like fnatic as one of their first matches, and they'll be meeting other teams like probably Jeetu and Cloud9. Even though teams like Jeetu and Cloud9 are a bit shaky, I just think at the end of the day, Complexity probably has managed to get this far, and that's probably where it'll stay. Will they go 0-3? There's a chance. I haven't really put many teams here. If I did have to choose, I'd see them either going 0-3 or 1-3. it just depends whether the teams they match up against on the day are prepared for them or not. Well, even though I put them to go 0-3, I was at least accurate in my analysis of this team. They're a fast-paced team who play very aggressively in a lot of rounds and actually cause some very exciting matches and some big upsets. Now, they've made it here. After going 2-0, they almost managed to go out, but they managed to bring it through and go 3-2 in the final stages, beating North. And I think that that's very impressive of them, but at this stage, now they're meeting teams who will have realised that, hang on, teams like Vega Squadron and Quantum Bellator Fire, these teams usually play fast-paced and a bit odd, and we're going to know how to counter them. And Vega probably will win a match here or there, might go 2-3, but I don't think they'll go through here. I don't think many people have that much confidence in Big to go through at this stage, since we're now with the stage where teams like Australis, FaZe, NaVi, Ninjas in Pyjamas can really, you know, show what they're made of. And Big did seem to struggle. I think a lot of people lost a bit of faith in them because they lost to team complexity. But this major has been full of unexpected results, and while Big have had some shaky matches, I believe that they do have the ability to throw up some more surprise results. And as we've had quite a lot of unexpected results in this major so far, I think for my risky team pick, I'm going to choose Big to qualify. Probably a very close set of matches, and likely going into triple overtime in Inferno, knowing how this has gone. But if I'm not choosing a team like HellRaisers or fnatic, who are the teams that could probably make it in this slot, I think Big is going to be the one to make it when all is said and done. So there we have it. For the Legend stage of this Pick'em challenge, I've gone for these teams. I think in the previous stage, if you watched that video, you'll have seen I've made some pretty silly decisions with teams like Virtus Pro going through. That was kind of me expecting them to pull a bit of an upset, as we weren't sure what would come from them, even though they had been a bit shaky. This time around, you'll see the results are pretty much picking only the top teams. So while I am playing it pretty safe, I think there are the chance of upsets, as there always been. But again, I'd be interested to see what you pick for this stage, so if you'd like to, please write it down in the comments below. And at the end of the day, whether we get bronze, silver or gold, I just hope we see some more amazing matches.
Yay!